Hey, good morning or afternoon, everybody, depending on where you're located today. So I appreciate everybody joining this quick webinar, and it's a pleasure to be able to give you some of my thoughts on this. And so I think that now is a great time to talk about some things you need to do related to your patient pay. And you must agree with me, or you wouldn't be joining this webinar. Some of the things I think that make this a great time to talk about it is it's deductible season. And so, it's a brand new year. And with that, we tend to get more deductibles, and that increases our patient pay. So it's a good time to look at that. We also have seen an increase in elective surgeries. I know those have been on and off over the past year, but we're continuing to see an increase there. So that's a great time to talk about patient pay. It's also tax refund time. And so I believe the IRS is now accepting tax returns. And so, some of your patients may be looking for a spot to spend that money, and what better way to do that than to pay their medical bills? And so an opportunity to look at that. And then, COVID has really accelerated a lot of things when you talk about patient pay, just the way people are using technology now. And so it's a great time to talk about that too, because we are very seasoned, all of us, right, in COVID right now, and what that means as a consumer as well as in business. And so I'm going to talk about 6 items that I think you should think about in regards to patient pay. And so we'll just kind of move through those. The first one is just millennials. And I know it really depends on where you are, in your generation on how you approach this. But for a lot of years, organizations have kind of ignored millennials and just stayed with standard and normal business processes. And so interesting statistics are millennials, 75 million millennials right now, and they've surpassed baby boomers right now as far as a generation. And the prediction is by 2028, which is really only 7 years from now, that's going to make up 75% of the workforce. And so that is a generation of folks that have a lot of voice and are doing a lot of things. And so we need to make sure that we are adapting to that. All of them have phones. All of them, for the most part, are demanding multi-channel support, and they have really high expectations on customer service. And so those seem like they're conflicting, but they're really not. So they want to be able to self-serve themselves, but in the event they need to talk to somebody or interact with somebody, they really have high expectations on service. And 99% are more likely to rely on an online review, what somebody says about a product. And so if you think about that, in the past, you maybe asked your neighbor and they said, hey, John Deere's a great tractor, and you'd use that. Well, nowadays you go on to either the John Deere website or Amazon or wherever it might be, and you look at what other people have to say about that. And so that's just something that we have to keep in mind as well. So they're the largest consumer group. And so my question for you would be, have you adapted your service model and technology really to capitalize on that group? I run across a facility sometimes that currently don't even accept online payments, right? And so the patients can't even make a payment online. And so that would be one of the basic things you'd want to make sure you could do for millennials is accept an online payment, or the payment platform is really clunky. It doesn't work on a mobile platform. You have to be on a computer to do that. And majority of households nowadays, unless they're using a computer for work, they're doing the majority of their online stuff either on an iPad or on a phone. And so you want to make sure that you have a platform that's mobile friendly and that, is not clunky to use to really adapt to that. What options are you allowing your patients? What about payment plans? What kind of self-service stuff can you do there? And when they do need to reach out for help, what kind of services are you providing them? So we're going to talk more about that. But I think this is just a good reminder when you think about self-pay that we have this group, these millennials that are predominantly in the workforce right now and are predominantly going to be your majority of your patient base. And so are you doing everything you can to capitalize on that? The next one is really around immediate communications, right? They all build on each other. But with texting, I do remember the days, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, when I could take a car ride home and it was my quiet time. And now, we're all getting inundated with texts and phone calls. And so, people have an expectation, immediate answers, that they can get information quickly, they can conduct stuff quickly. And so they're just the speed of stuff moving is a lot quicker than it ever used to be. 70% of consumers want to conduct transactions electronically. That's increased up 10% from 2019 to 2020. And I can tell you in 2020, I'm sure with COVID, we've had even more and more people conducting things electronically, just because a lot of facilities where they used to go to, like a bank, for example, is closed, right? They closed their lobbies because of COVID. And so it's forced a lot of people to do electronic communications than they haven't before. A mobile friendly website, 72% of people access those on a cell phone. That's an interesting stat to think about. 10 years ago, it was 11% was electronic and 89% used a landline. Now look at that, very few people even have landlines, and they're primarily accessing stuff on a cell phone. 90% of folks prefer to speak to a company employee when they have a question. And so, it's great to provide a lot of self-service capabilities, but you may have had one of these experiences where you have a question, right? And you're trying to reach customer service and you sit in queue for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and then it dumps you out. So you got to call back and go through a phone tree again, and hope you get somebody. And then when you reach that person, they have no idea what you already talked about or what you already looked up on the site. And so really people have an expectation that you have employees that are answering those phone calls and can answer those questions. Average speed to answer matters. And so, really got to have that average speed to answer. And so if you have to force somebody to sit on the phone for 20 minutes to talk to them, my guess is they're probably a little bit upset when you finally get them on the phone because they had to wait for so long. And then if you don't have good information for them, it's going to get even worse. And, the other good statistic out there is 63% would switch brands to another company if it was an easier experience. And I think, if you see the growth at Amazon, especially through COVID, it's pretty easy to just, instead of getting in your car, driving to the store and getting something, sure, you can get it today, but you can do one click and you can have it tomorrow. And a lot of people are willing to wait for ease of use. And so, when they're choosing which hospital to go to, if there is a choice for them, they may pick one that's a lot easier for them to make payments, to set themselves up on payment plans, to talk to people that know what they're doing. So just things to consider there related to immediate communication. So good time to think about how you're doing that. Another one I think we overlook a lot is a lot of facilities just have a payment plan. They have a financial aid policy that they're using, how they deal with all those different things, and it just doesn't get updated, right? It gets created, it gets published, it's on the website for people to see, it's on the back of statements, but do you ever take time to take a look at how successful that is and how that's adapting to your clientele, to your patients? Do you have a strategy around that? Can your staff explain what it is? Do they know why you have what you're doing? And when I talk about strategy, I often get asked for best practices, and we work with facilities. I get asked for, what's our best practices on this? And so we have best practices on all the components of a financial policy. But really, it's a lot of questions, right? We have to have a discussion about it because really it has to meet the needs of your community, really to be effective. What is your point of service collection targets? Your strategy around your collection strategy would be, how much do you think you're collecting at point of service? When are you asking for those payments? What are the items you're going to ask for payments up front on? And so if you really don't have a good strategy and you haven't communicated that to your teams, that's a good opportunity to do that, because if you don't have those targets, how do you know if that's successful from a collection strategy standpoint? Another one is, do you offer a prompt pay discount? If you do, why do you offer it? If you don't, why do you not offer it? And have you taken an opportunity to take a look at how that might drive payments, right? You might be able to drive earlier payments in the collection process, which is going to save you on costs and get you that cash sooner. How much are you losing by offering a prompt pay discount versus what you're gaining, and how is that driving specific behavior? And I can tell you in my experiences, that is demographic specific, it's location specific, it's community specific. And so that's something that really has to be dialed in correctly for your community to get the biggest bang for your bucks. You also maybe want to look at what your competition is doing and how that stacks up with what your pricing looks like as well. So that you stay competitive on that too. So, with price transparency, if there's an opportunity to tell people if you have a prompt pay, if they pay in the first 30 days, that might be a good strategy for you. So if you haven't had an opportunity to talk about why you offer or don't offer one and make sure it's dialed in, I encourage you to do that. Another one is, does your payment plan guidelines meet your community? What options exist there if they don't qualify for charity? Are your expectations that, hey, we're only allowing 6-month payment plans regardless of the balance? Is that meeting the need? You have a lot of people that just can't get on a payment plan, so they don't, and so they end up going to bad debt. Or are you allowed, hey, here's an opportunity, we're going to have certain balances, we're going to extend that over 12 months or 24 months, and is it really meeting the needs of what your average balance is, what your community needs are there? And if you can't meet those needs, what other options are available for patients to achieve that? Another one is charity care. A lot of times people just adopt a charity care policy 10, 15 years ago, and we do know that community dynamics change, right? And so have you had a chance to look at how are you basing that off the federal poverty guidelines? What's your success rate of getting those? How much stuff's going to bad debt that could be considered charity, and are you better off offering that? Obviously you got to balance that with your cost report and a variety of different things, but sometimes I see that, charity care is just one of those things that was talked about, and maybe isn't talked about again, and now you really get your biggest bang for your buck on charity. So that might be something you review with your collection strategy as well. A lot of places have seasonality, and so sometimes it's related to tourism, sometimes it's related to agriculture, it really could be. And so are you looking at your collection strategy in regards to maybe the seasonality that you have? And then are you capitalizing on windfall opportunities? Tax season is a windfall opportunity. There's people that are getting extra money that they didn't have throughout the year. And so is there an opportunity to increase your collection activities to reach out to them? Or are you offering a one-time discount if they pay their balance in full? Some of those things. Stimulus checks were another one that we tended to see an increase in payments. As people get stimulus checks, there's an opportunity, to give them an incentive to want to give that to you related to that. So, some interesting stats that I have is 26% of consumers can always pay bills on time. So what does that tell you? Well, 64% struggle with that. And so how do you make sure you're meeting those needs, that you stay a priority to them to do that? 17% always pay unforeseen bills without using credit. So, a majority of folks may have to tap into credit to pay that. And, prompt pay discount might be an opportunity to talk about that. Could you get that payment up front from them? Because, they're going to tap that probably anyways and give them some savings. It's good for you. It's good for them. And we talked about tax time. So, look at incentives at tax time, really that your capacity to pay gets into all this stuff of your patients. And so is there incentives, and does the payer mix drive capacity to pay, and how effective is your payment plans and seasonality? So I think, if you haven't had an opportunity to just open up your collection strategy, it might be a good time to talk about it. Why are we doing the things we're doing, and can we dial that in anywhere else, and how can we be more effective to the needs of our community? Because I think if you can find out what maximizes the amount of collections you can get and it meets the needs of your community, that's a win-win for everybody. The next one is, we hear a lot about bots, right? And so I know that Gartner out there said that 85% of consumer interactions are going to be non-human by 2025. Do you believe that prediction? I don't know. I can tell you that I'm kind of mixed on that, although you continue to see a lot of that. And if you really understand what this artificial intelligence or bots are, it starts to make a lot of sense how that's gonna be 85%. I don't think that's ever going to get to 100. There are times when a human has to talk to a human. But if you're using any kind of IVR, which is an automated payment by phone, or you're checking your balance by phone, if you call people and use those tools, they're getting better and better. That's really artificial intelligence or a bot. It's an automated way to process a payment. If you're using any kind of automated scheduling software, for your front end services, that's really doing the same thing. And so when we talk about bots, they do a lot of different things, but it's really just automating human things that require human work in an automated way. And so some ways that we've seen some real gains there, and I think you continue to see in the industry, is insurance eligibility. That's something everybody's talked a lot about, but really it's a way. One thing I'd ask you maybe to look at is when an account gets sent to self-pay, Medicaid, state Medicaid is just different across multiple states, right? And there's sometimes that there's retro eligibility that you get on accounts that you didn't know about when it was going through the process. And so one way you could use bots would be to do some insurance eligibility, checking right when it gets assigned to self-pay to see if there's any retro eligibility, and it allows you to go back and capitalize those dollars, because the concern, or to realize those dollars, because the concern that you're going to have is you put that through a whole 120-day process, and you're probably not going to get paid on that anyways from the patient, and it might be to a point where you can't bill that out now. So there's a great opportunity to just easily turn some of that on to look at that. Another one is address checks. The USPS has that pretty much automated, if you're using the right software, where when you send it out, it will correct that address for you. But you also have the ability now with the USPS and some services that return mail can be automated to a point where it gets shredded and you get a file back. And so you can see those non-deliverable mail, opportunity. You didn't reach a patient and it had to come back. And so you can automate that in a file. And what can you do with that? You can update that in your system in an automated way. You can automatically put it in a queue for someone to skip trace. You can even automate the skip tracing of that if you want to. And so that's an area that we've spent some time looking at too. So I think it's a good one. Sometimes we hear the word artificial intelligence, or we hear bots, and we feel like that's just overwhelming, or maybe that's just when I use Alexa and I tell Alexa to do something. But really, I need you to think about it differently. And I bet if you sat back and you categorized or cataloged what you were doing, you're probably already doing quite a bit of this in your organization. And so if you look at what you're already doing, then it gives you an opportunity to say, well, how can we continue to expand that? Right. And I think there's a lot of good things in self-pay. When we talk about these millennials and everybody else, there's a lot of those processes that can be automated, right? So that you can have your folks spend the time on the phone when they need to talk to people on the phone. Do they need to gather an address update over the phone? No, there's a lot of different ways you can get that information, and you can really interface that a lot of different ways back into your systems too. So just understanding the technology that's out there and leveraging that, I think, is really important. So let's move on to number 5. And I think this has become kind of apparent in COVID. I think this is an area that really I've seen some big initiatives come out of COVID with some of our clients that we work with, and it was really the differentiation of their brand, right? And there's a couple of different things here. One is you want your brand to be very relevant. You want your patients to understand your brand, especially with some of the security that's out there. If things that you're sending don't have your brand on them or don't look right, a lot of people are going to ignore those, right? I mean, there's so much phishing that happens, and so the other thing is the way that patients will quickly complain on social media can erode your brand pretty quick if you're not taking that seriously. So, one of the things I look at is what is your brand for your hospital, your health system, and what makes it different, and are you spending time, especially on your self-pay statements and some of that other stuff, making sure your brand looks perfect, right? Because that's going to go to patients every day and they're going to see that. And so is your brand perfect? And are you really explaining the differentiator there? And if you haven't taken an opportunity to make sure that, your website is matching the branding on your statements, is matching the branding on your patient portal, is matching, and your telephone numbers are saying your facility name and all that stuff, and people are answering the phone the same way, and all those different things, it all makes up your brand. And so you want to make sure you have that consistency. Most millennials, if you send them an email that doesn't look like it's coming from your facility, are just going to delete it if they even read the email, right? And so the other thing to look at is have you invested in some other technology like texting and other things to really reach out to folks with that branding too. But 47% of customers will voice a customer service complaint on social media. That's one of the things I talked about. I think as folks were more at home with COVID, the number of feedbacks that are happening on Amazon and other places, I think I read the stat was has increased 300%, right? A lot of people are just grading products, grading services, putting those online reviews. And I don't know if it's just because they had more, they're sitting at home and they're bored, so I might as well just do some reviews, or they're using more online services. I'm not 100% sure what's driving that, but I can tell you if it's not something you're paying attention to, where is your facility getting that feedback? Are they posting stuff on your Facebook, or they, putting stuff on Yelp or whatever it might be? You might want to make sure your marketing department's plugged into that, and you can look at that and read what they're saying and figure out how you address that. And so really, brand loyalty is all about brand loyalty. And making sure that you're spending time there. All right, let's go on to the last one, and we have seen a huge 2020. There was just a lot of security violations. It's likely to triple. They think in 2021, data breaches have been out there. If you look at the industry reports, there's just a lot of that. And so I completely agree that it's going to triple in 2021. The interesting part of that statistic is the majority of those were still initiated or created by the end users, right, our employees. So it was an employee clicking an email they shouldn't have clicked, or not protecting their password. They needed to protect their password, or they lost a laptop that got stolen and wasn't encrypted, or all these different things. And so although there are some violations that are happening, by people hacking systems, really the end users are the biggest risk there. And so when you think about self-pay and just the exposure that you have with your patient pay, you need to make sure you're doing certain things. I mean, PCI compliance is a big one, and really around PCI compliance, it's just the handling that you're doing with the credit card number. I mean, I think that's the biggest piece that you can control around PCI with your self-pay. And so you want to make sure that your folks are not writing credit card numbers down on a piece of paper, right? If you're recording phone calls, are you pausing so you're not capturing that recorded number on a recorded phone call that might be accessed for somebody, that credit card number, when they're putting it into a website? Is it encrypted, to a point where it's at that highest level of PCI compliance if it's being captured for them to use in the future? All of those different things you need to think about, because just, employees writing it down on a piece of paper to process later, that's huge risk, right? How do you know that that's going to be disposed of and someone's not going to get that piece? You also need to look at HIPAA, making sure that you're validating that. And so the biggest thing I would look at for your self-pay folks is, are they validating that the patient has the right for that information before they talk to them? Are they asking those questions consistently to validate those patients? Because a lot of phishing happens if you find, if one of these phishing companies finds a place that will just give out information without validating that the patient should have that information, they're going to, pick that information all day long, right? Because it's easy to get that. And then you want to make sure, a lot of us have remote workforces, that you have a secure connection set up to your office computers, that you're sending data through SFTP sites. You're not sending stuff over the open internet that has PHI, all those different things. And so if you're scratching your head right now, like, are we doing that? It's a good time to go check and make sure that you are. We're all required to do risk assessments. And so you might take a look at your risk assessment if you haven't seen that lately, and just see if there's areas that your self-pay might be at risk. And then the other thing you can do, because our employees are the biggest risk factor, right, to having violations, it's just continue to make sure you're doing security awareness training, right? I think it's just that constant reminding people that you see an email that looks like that, it's pretty easy to do in a staff meeting, pull up a couple fake emails. What doesn't look right about this email? You can click on the to line and see that this is clearly not from the company it says it's from, or there's clearly misspellings in here, or they're asking you to buy some gift cards and scan the codes and send them to somebody. That seems really weird. I'm pretty sure the CEO is not asking you to do that. All those different things. And so security awareness training, I think, is really important to make sure you're doing that too. So I think from a patient pay perspective, that's an area you need to focus on as well. So I covered some stuff. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer all of those. I hope that it sparked at least one or two things to think about. Hey, how do I maximize collections? How do I provide more meaningful services to our community so we can meet their needs? And how do I make sure we're safeguarding what we're doing? And so here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me at jcoffin@hrgpros.com, or that you can give me a call too if you want to. If you have any questions or you want to talk about anything in more detail that I brought up. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Molly to kind of finish this webinar. So thank you very much for attending, and I appreciate your time.